It's July 16th, 2026, and AMD's launching a new AM5 CPU. It's Zen 4? The 7700X 3D. Let's take a closer look. It's a new AM5 CPU. Things are pretty bad out there, economically, macroeconomically speaking. AMD's doing something kind of interesting here. They're undercutting scalpers on eBay, both with the 5800X 3D launch. That is an AM4 CPU that, yes, AMD has relaunched in 2026. There's renewed availability of the 5800X 3D, which has really tamped down prices on the secondary markets because the pricing was out of control. And AMD is also launching the 7700X 3D. It's like the 7800X 3D, Zen 4 for AM5, except it's a little slower. It's still 120 watts TDP. You can see TDP it down. Strangely, I think we can expect the power efficiency of the CPU to be worse than a 7800X 3D. However, for the specific one that I happened to get from AMD, it was better. That's probably an outlier. That's probably not really expected normally, but it's 3D V-cache. 3D V-cache is also useful in now the winter of our discontent in terms of availability of parts, because the 3D V-cache offsets the fact that the memory of the system may be slower, or you may be running a single DIMM on your AM5 platform. It's a CPU that you can run on potato class motherboards. I've got our live mixer here. This is decidedly not a potato class motherboard. This is actually an X870 live mixer Wi-Fi. But I've also got the A620M Pro RS that I've reviewed previously. And this CPU runs just as well on any of these platforms because AM5 doesn't demand a lot of power. And it's 8 cores, 16 threads, 120 watts. It'll work on basically anything. You could probably solder some wires to it upside down and it'll still run and be fine. Being 3D V-cache, it has 104 megs of cache total, and it does support AMD Expo. We tested DDR5 6000. G.Skill has the new ultra low latency DDR5 memory. We will take a look at that separately. That's not really part of this launch. That's also available in the market. Really, this CPU is aimed at being $330, again, to sort of undercut secondary markets and to undercut some shortages. Even though it's not Zen 5, AMD sort of looked at what was happening in the market and they said, well, you know, a lot of people are still buying the 7800X 3D. We don't have quite as many, pieces of silicon that can meet the standards for 5 gigahertz and 7800X 3D. Let's downbend just a little bit for the 7700X 3D. And I'm really pleased to see that the CPU is 8 cores and not 6 cores, because we also had the budget 6-core CPU. I think that was a Micro Center exclusive. Sort of hard to get your hands on because there wasn't really a lot of silicon, from what I understand, available that met all the criteria, but was 6 cores. The 7700X 3D looks like it's going to be a little bit more available in the market, which is nice. Let's take a look at the benchmarks. Oh, that'll give you a heart attack. What's that noise? It was a random piece of plastic floating through the air. So for the benchmarks, I decided to do something a little different. GPUs. I think it's a little disingenuous to test the 5090 on a CPU like this because most of the people that are buying the CPU are probably not buying the 5090. Most of the people that are buying the CPU probably are going to buy the 9060 XT or the 9070 XT. By far the biggest bang for the buck. I also tested the 5060 Ti from NVIDIA because that was it can be a reasonable value. The local Walmart here has had a pretty good deal on the 5060 Ti, which sounds odd, but is true. And so I was like, hey, let's just do some fun benchmarks and see how it goes. Starting with artificial benchmarks, 3D Mark, of course. Windows 11 on our X870E Aorus Master. For memory, we're using G.Skill. It's based on Hynix memory. It's a DDR5 6000, and we were running the 3000, the Expo 6000, which is a CL26. So it's pretty low latency. It's not the low latency kit, the new one, but it's pretty low latency. And this is memory that we already had because this memory is wildly expensive. But like I say, the X3D, if you want to run a single DIMM X3D V-Cache, you can do that. AMD even put that in their marketing material this time, and they're not wrong. It works. Anyway, 3D Mark, Firestrike, artificial benchmarks. 35,000 with the 5060 Ti, 33,000 with the 9060 XT, and 45,000, almost 46,000 for the 9070 XT. It's pretty awesome. Geekbench, CPU, wanted to test versus the Ultra 7 270K Plus, and yeah, it's 22,000 versus 15,000 for multi-core. Even the single-core performance, 3,200 versus 2,893 at 4.5 gigahertz top single clock speed, does hold us back in several scenarios, but also 329. It just depends. If we look at Cinebench 23, our single core speed in Cinebench, 1818 versus 2354, and the multi-core score, it's twice as fast, twice the performance. That makes sense because the Core Ultra 7 270K Plus has a lot of P and E cores. We've just got 8 cores, 16 threads on our AMD CPU. Cinebench 24, 118 versus 140 for single core, 1121 versus 2460 for the multi-core. Again, it's basically double and change for productivity. It's no secret the 270K Plus is going to pull ahead. And we'll see a couple of games. We've got a couple of games to look at. 8 to 64, if we look at our memory bandwidth, it's 62 gigabytes per second versus 105. Again, Intel wins here on raw memory bandwidth. We've only got the one CCD and the one CCD through the I/O tile, and it's Zen 4. It's a little bit of a bottleneck. You would need a 16-core Zen 4 to keep up with the full memory bandwidth. But our latency is pretty good, 69 nanoseconds versus 81. And this is using the same kit of memory on the two platforms. I mean, I could probably get the latency down a little bit on the Intel platform, but 81 nanoseconds on the Intel platform represents an earnest effort on my part to try to get like-for-like latency as much as I can without spending, an hour fiddling with it. And just for good measure, CPU-Z, 640 versus 889 for the single-core speed, and 6496 versus 18,214. This is basically the worst parts of the 7700 X3D. And it's pretty much all uphill and smooth sailing from here for the 7700 X3D. Let's look at gaming. Let's start with Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, their 5060 Ti, 232 FPS. The 5090, of course, is 331, as one would expect. 204 FPS for the 9060, 303 FPS for the 9070 XT. But look at this. With a 5090, 286 FPS. Our 1% lows, basically right in line. Now, again, if you are buying this CPU, you are probably not pairing it with a 5090. No one in their right mind, I think the 5080, if you're going to spend a lot of money on a GPU, there's probably a version of the 5080 coming that's going to have more VRAM, I'd say. So even buying a 5080 right now is questionable at best. Over 300 FPS on our 9070 XT for this older title. It's fantastic. But the real story here is those 1% lows. When the operating system does something weird, there's much less opportunity for a cache miss. There's more stuff that's held in the cache on the processor. That means generally smoother performance, especially when you're competing with background tasks. We look at Cyberpunk 2077. Look, our 5060 Ti is holding its own for 127, 168 for our 9070 XT. And yeah, the 5090 performs really well. If we step it up from 1080p to 1440p, things get a little rough for that 5060 Ti and our 9060 XT, but 131 FPS for the 9070 XT is pretty solid. And then at 4K, it's basically a wash. The 7700 X3D is pulling ahead with the 5090 as one would expect, but there's really not a significant performance difference between the Core Ultra 7 270K Plus and the 7700 X3D because the 5090 here is really the bottleneck. What about the Elder Scrolls? Again, it's an older title, but it's a lot of fun to play. 142 FPS with the 5090, 100 FPS with our 9070 XT, 55 FPS for our 5060 Ti. We step it up to 1440p. It starts to get into unplayable territory with our 5060 Ti. 73 FPS for our 9070 XT. It's a pretty smooth overall experience. 50 FPS for our 1% lows. At 4K, it's 30 FPS and 37 FPS with our 9070 XT. This is on Ultra. You can dial down the graphics settings to get more performance, but 74 FPS on our 5090. This is the remastered version of Oblivion 2, so keep that in mind. Far Cry 6, an older title, just 5090 versus 5090, 270K Plus versus 7700 X3D. At 1080p, it's basically the same performance. The 7700 X3D is pulling ahead just a little bit. 132 versus 138 for our 1% lows in favor of the 7700 X3D. Monster Hunter Wilds is pretty much the same story. 138 versus 130 for our top line number, and 81 versus 78 for our 1% lows. Very similar performance. And this is more, it's 1080p, so we're not quite in GPU bottleneck territory, but there's really not a huge difference here for gaming. For Borderlands 4 with our 9070 XT, our 7700 X3D can manage 84 FPS. Paired with the 5090, we can do 119 FPS. Obviously for this kind of gaming, performance difference between a 5090 and a 9070 XT, like you'd be better off to buy the 9070 XT, invest the cash difference, and then use the money that you've made on the market not crashing, macroeconomic existential dread setting in, must switch gears, never mind. You can buy a better GPU later, that's all I'm saying. Color Obscure, 105 FPS and 77 FPS again. 7700 X3D plus 9070 XT. It's a really powerful combination here. 1440p, 57 FPS with 39 for our 1% lows. This is on Epic. Dial it down a little bit and you can get 90 FPS locked in. 4K, 32 FPS. 4K, 9070 XT. You're going to need FSR. You're going to need other technologies, and that's going to be a different video. So what's the bottom line on this CPU? It's 8 cores, 3D V-Cache, $329, which middle of July, late July, 2026, things what they are with pricing, this is really good. And it gives you some options for your build. Like you could reasonably consider just going for a single DIMM build, and you wouldn't be penalized too hard on the gaming side of things. You could put a few more dollars into your GPU. A 9060 XT or a 9070 XT would be a really solid option for this. And because it's 8 cores, you can lean into that a little more. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to include Borderlands, because Borderlands is kind of a monster. And it's not all down to optimization problems. It actually is a game that can use kind of a lot of compute horsepower. And that's something that gives the Core Ultra 270K Plus an advantage, or at least potentially. But the 3D V-Cache advantage on the 7700 X3D kind of edges it out just a little bit. Both of them are really solid processors, IMHO, especially around the $300 mark. But AMD also has the proven platform longevity. You can use a 600 series AM5 motherboard. You can use a launch day AM5 motherboard with this processor, provided that it has a BIOS update. It's going to run best with a BIOS update, in other words. So there might be a few abandoned motherboards here and there, but generally, you're going to have a pretty good deal on motherboard. So you can find somebody upgrading, you can find somebody that's got maybe like a 6-core, something like that. Maybe you find some old stock, maybe raid Micro Center and get an open box deal. I don't know. But AM5 has got legs, and it's upgradable. And it looks like it's also going to carry us forward for Zen 6. So at some point in the future, if things return to normal in 2030, maybe you can get a Zen 6 CPU for your AM5 motherboard that you deploy today with the 7700 X3D. If the bubble doesn't pop, there is a lot of indications that market pricing for memory will not improve. If you have old, slow launch day DDR5 memory, another system that you're upgrading from, even generic no heat spreader OEM DDR5 memory from like corporate surplus, that will run well in the 3D V-Cache scenario because you're not really as dependent on the memory keeping up with the game because everything lives in cache on the processor. Generally, that will be true. So this gives you more options. This gives you more affordable options. It's a little bit more affordable than 7800 X3D, although, it seems like the prices on those, even the Zen 4 or 7800 X3D, have gone up. And certainly the prices on the 5800 X3D for AM4 have gone astronomical. It's gone vertical. DDR4 memory has gone up in price so much because DDR5 is so unavailable. So yeah, you're going to have to do work and figure out what is the best bang for the buck. If you're putting together a build, if you're thinking about this, you've got a lot of homework that you have to do. But fortunately, we've got a really strong community for that kind of thing. So if you're embarking on that, join us in the forum, chat. I don't know. I'm one of those level 1 has been a quick look. Like, we're launching Zen 4 CPUs in 2026. This is a dark timeline. dark timeline. But maybe we can get through this together. I don't know. I'm one of this level 1. I'm signing out. You can find me in the level 1 forums, rocking back and forth with my head between my knees. I'm signing out, and I'll see you there.